What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In the last draft video that I did, there was a lot of feedback about how bad my forward line was. That wasn't the kind of team that I could go with in game week 1. So I've taken that on board, been playing around with different teams that I could go for. And I want to show you in this one what I've come up with, a slight alternative, and what squad I might go for if I bench boost in game week 1. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button and help me hit 500k. And let's get into it. So let's start with the defensive players. In goal, it's Robert Sanchez from Chelsea. I'm a little bit afraid to say that any player is locked into my team right now because we still have just over a week to go until the game week 1 deadline. New information might present itself, which could change my thinking. But I'm pretty confident if I spend 5 million on that spot, it's going to be Sanchez. I do have slight doubts starting to creep in though, because as I've said multiple times during pre-season, the transfer window shuts after game week 3. Chelsea like buying players. Could they buy a new goalkeeper after the season starts? I guess there's potential there, but he played well at the Club World Cup. He's going to be their number 1 going into the season. I think it's probably worth risking. I did have sales in my first draft that I put out the day FPL launched, but if I'm going to go for a Chelsea defensive player and a Forest one, I much prefer Sanchez plus a Forest defender rather than sales and a Chelsea defender, because Colwill is fine, but he's not as good as Nico Williams at the same price. So I don't really want to go for him unless I'm going for a Chelsea defensive double up, which isn't on my mind right now. And Cucurella is also fine at 6 million, but for 5.5, I can save a little bit of money and have Murillo, who's great for defensive contributions. So if I'm going for a Chelsea and Forest defensive play, it'll be Sanchez and a Forest defender rather than the other way around. On the bench, I've got Dubravka. There are rumours linking him with a move from Newcastle to Burnley. If that happens, presumably he'll be first choice. There's no other guaranteed 4 million playing goalkeepers right now. That's why he's in the squad. If he does move to Burnley, and it looks like he's going to start straight away, I am open to bench boost game week 2 with Dubravka and Esteve. Double up on Burnley defence against Sunderland at home. It's not all that exciting, but I don't think the bench boost is that good of a chip anyway to worry about too much. So let's keep an eye on that. If I decide to bench boost, which I'm going to talk about later, and Dubravka's not an option, there's no other £4 million goalkeeper, I'll just go 2 4.5s probably and downgrade Sanchez. With Van Dijk, he's my £6 million defender of choice right now. To be honest, I don't see that changing. Cucurella I'm not going to go with at 6 million. I think with Gabriel, we're still waiting to see if he's fit to start the season. He probably will be. But I think long-term, Van Dijk is a slightly better option, slightly better fixtures first 6 weeks. And he's got good goal threat, and he's slightly better for defensive contributions as well. So if it's one or the other, I probably do just about prefer Van Dijk, although I do love Gabriel for FPL. And also, if I remember correctly, Arsenal didn't have great fixtures to start the season last year, and he popped up with a few goals. That's the kind of thing he can do. So he's not written off completely, but I think I prefer Van Dijk. And look, I'm going to get very tempted before the deadline to go for Vardiol, because if he doesn't play left back, he'll probably play left centre back. But also, I'm kind of scarred from what happened last season going Kwanzaa, Barco and Nkunku. I very quickly had to make transfers I didn't really want to make. And if a Man City player starts getting benched, that will just frustrate me straight away. That's why I'm probably going to go for Van Dijk if I go for a 6 million. I think if I moved Van Dijk to someone else, I might even drop him down to a 5.5, Tarkowski or Murillo, and just save some money. But the thing with Liverpool defender is, I'm not sure I'm going to wildcard early. And so although they've got Newcastle away in 2 and Arsenal at home in 3, I do want them after that. And I just don't think I can risk Kerkez because I'm still a little bit worried that Robertson will get some minutes. And Connor Bradley apparently has an injury right now, which should make Frimpong nailed at right back. But I don't think that injury is long term. So I just can't go for those minutes risk when I can just get Van Dijk who's going to play every single game. My other 2 defenders for the back 3 in game week 1 are Pedro Porro and Nico Williams, both fullbacks rather than centre-back defensive contribution monsters. But I think if I want to target those fixtures for Spurs in the short term where they're pretty good, I want their best defender. I think that is Porro. He is capable of doing stuff going forward, even if he's not great for defensive contributions. And he doesn't have to be a long-term pick. I could move him on later on. And Nico Williams just saves 0.5 over Murillo. He's a little bit attacking. He's not too bad in that regard, is what I'm trying to say. And he's also not bad for defensive contributions either. But the thought has crossed my mind, I could just switch them around. I could go for Murillo and Romero instead and just go for 2 centre-backs. Murillo we know is excellent for defensive contributions. Romero might not be too bad, and he has some goal threat as well. Van der Ven's also an option, obviously, if I wanted to save loads of money. But I think if the money is there, why not go for Porro? He's got Burnley at home game week 1, and I could just move him on later on. And Nico Williams looks great value at 5, but that could be Murillo and Romero. And on the bench, I've got Esteve from Burnley, £4 million defender. I think with him and Rodon, basically it depends when you want to play them. Like if you need a cheap defender for game week 1, just get Rodon. He's got Everton at home. The thing with Esteve is when Porro's got City away in game week 2, he's got Sunderland at home in game... Esteve's got Sunderland at home, so I could play him instead. There's Forest at home in 5, Leeds at home in 8. There are just some weeks where he might be useful in the first 8, more so than Rodon is. That's why he's in the team. Nothing more than that. And then I've got Lacroix. I think Palace got Forest at home in 2, Sunderland at home in 4. He's quite a useful bench option. Very good for defensive contributions. Good goal threat as well. Just a solid bench pick. That could be two 4.5s on the bench, by the way. Like Joachim Andersen and Van der Ven go for double up on Spurs defence. Maybe Richards and Anderson. Maybe Agbadou and Anderson, Agbadou and Richards. Whatever, right? Konza as well. There's lots of 4.5s. But I quite like the idea of having Lacroix. He's a decent option, I think, to start the season. It's time to step away from your FPL draft for 10 minutes, which coincidentally is all the time you need to get your Fantasy EFL team set up. It's a great game to play alongside FPL. You only need to pick 7 players and 2 clubs. There's no deadlines and no budget, so there's no long-term planning needed. And the championship starts this weekend, so sign up to play Fantasy EFL before the first game by using the link in the description below or scanning that QR code on screen. It's completely free to play, and there's some amazing prizes up for grabs, including 72 season tickets, 1 for the winner of each club's mini-league. You can create your own mini-league at any time to battle your friends and family, and if you want to see if you can beat me, you can join the Let's Talk FPL League by using the code LTFPL EFL. So to show you how quick and easy it is to pick a team, I'm going to go through mine right now. Now, Leicester City have Sheffield Wednesday at home to start their championship season, which is a pretty good fixture right now. So in goal, I'm going to go for Hermansen. There have been links with him moving to other clubs, but it hasn't happened yet. So presumably he's going to start this weekend. And even if he moves away later, it doesn't matter because every week I get to pick a fresh team. And then up front, I'm going to go for Ayew. I've got to have a Leicester attacker in there. And I'm also going to captain him as well. Bolton have a strong fixture against Plymouth at home this week, so I'm going to go for a double up on their defence. First pick is going to be Dacre Cogley. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that just about correctly. And then my second choice is going to be Conway. Like Leicester, I'm expecting Sheffield United to start well in the Championship this weekend, so I'm going to go for 2 of their players. Burrows is going to be my final defender. I'm playing a 3-2-1 formation, which is quite strong in Fantasy EFL. And then my second pick is going to be Hamer in midfield. My final midfield pick is Keeler Dunn for Barnsley up against Burton. Another good fixture. And then for my 2 clubs, I'm going to go for Crawley Town as 1 up against Newport County at home. And then for my final club, there's only one option really, and that has got to be Leicester. They're looking so strong against Sheffield Wednesday. I've got to have 2 of their players and pick them as one of my clubs. Like I said, super quick and easy to get a team selected every single week, and a great game to play alongside FPL with no deadlines and no budgets. To get the Fantasy EFL app downloaded, just click the link in the description below or scan that QR code on screen. And to join my mini league, use the code LTFPL EFL. Good luck this weekend. So if you're anything like me, you've probably come up with a lot of drafts during pre-season. It's always interesting to go back and look at those earlier drafts to see what your initial thinking was. So I went back and looked at the first draft video that I did the day that FPL launched, and my midfield was Salah, Palmer, Eze, Njai, and Anderson, who are all pretty good picks. I think with Eze at 7.5, I really need the rumours of him going to Arsenal to go away to consider him for my Game Week 1 squad. But I do really like him, and I think Salah, Palmer, Njai, Anderson, all solid picks. My last draft video that I did had Salah and Palmer again. They've pretty much been mainstays the whole way through. Bruno Fernandes, Wirtz from Liverpool, and then Sarr from Crystal Palace. So a stronger midfield, but I had lots of negative reactions because of what the forward line looked like. So basically, I've reduced the money from the last draft and gone back to some of those players from the first draft. And the midfield now looks like this. Salah, Palmer, Bruno Fernandes still in there. No Wirtz. I've downgraded him to Njai. And then I've gone for Anderson at 5.5 million. That lets me still have a couple of expensive defenders like Van Dijk and Porro. Lets me still have Salah, Palmer and Fernandes. But also more importantly, which I'll show you in a second, lets me spend a bit more money in attack. With Bruno, I think I do prefer him over Wirtz because I know what I'm going to get with him. He's better for defensive contributions. He's on penalties. Wirtz does save you a bit of money. I'm not against going with him in my Game Week 1 squad. And actually, I have played around with how I could have Wirtz or Marmoush instead of Njai, but you've got to make too many sacrifices elsewhere, I think. So for now, if it's Fernandes or Wirtz, I'm probably going to go for Bruno. For what it's worth, I'm not still 100% confident he's an amazing pick because of the fixtures, first 5, but he is consistent. So I like that about him. My 6.5 million midfielder, I've mostly had either Njai or Sarr in all of my drafts. Kudus I do like as well. Mitoma's not bad. But with Njai, you've got basically a nailed-on penalty taker. Like, Everton are trying to make some more attacking signings. That might have a slight impact on Njai's minutes. But he's going to start pretty much every game for Everton, and he's first-choice penalty taker. And sometimes in FPL, and this is a really boring thing to say, by the way, but sometimes it's about picking those players you know are always going to play and have penalties, because they can just get you points from nowhere. So I'm not fully locked in on Njai because I think his underlying data in terms of expected goals per 90, expected assists when you remove penalties are pretty underwhelming. But the fixtures are good for Everton to start the season, and he's got those penalties in his locker. With Sarr, I think if he didn't have Chelsea away opening game, I'd probably go for him because he was very good last year. And the fixtures after Chelsea away are not bad. It's between those two for me. Kudus might make an appearance at some point because it's Burnley at home. But surely I just take the nail penalty taker. And then for 5.5 or below, I think Anderson's probably going to be the most consistent player because of those defensive contributions, because he sometimes takes set pieces. He will chip in with the odd attack and return. Reinders at Man City could be amazing if he gets the minutes. Do I want that headache? Villa have just signed another attacker. Marlon is not on my radar whatsoever now. You know, I could spend 0.5 million more, go for Tielemans or Paquetá. Paquetá's on penalties. His minutes are good. He does chip in with some defensive contributions. But to get this team, I've had to sacrifice somewhere. And going for Anderson over Tielemans or Paquetá is where I've spent the money. I'm trying to think of the other 5.5s. I really just don't think any of them are that interesting. Like, they are potentially interesting, but there's no kind of guarantee they're going to be playing regularly. Like, any of the Villa players is a no, apart from maybe Marlon, but I've just mentioned him. I just don't think I can go there. Tavernier for Bournemouth is mostly nailed on, but his minutes aren't fully secure. I think the Brighton players like Gruder and Ciso, etc., Brighton have got too many attackers. Caicedo is great for defensive contributions, but the fixtures are slightly better for Forest, and I think Anderson is more attacking, so he's kind of ruled out. I don't like the 5.5s from Fulham, really. Like Harry Wilson, they keep getting linked to a right winger. Harry Wilson's minutes are just not secure enough. Maybe a Leeds one, possibly. Like, I'm just going down the list now. Reinders I already mentioned. Anderson's great. Tonali's not bad, but I don't think he's as good as Anderson. Adingra if you want an attacking player. But we're playing FPL this season with defensive contributions, and Anderson's just great for them. Arias I would definitely consider at Wolves, potentially. But Anderson just goes in, and for the first 6 or so weeks, I just leave him there, and I just use my transfers elsewhere. That's the thing I like about him at 5.5. That's the reason he was in my first draft, and that's the reason he's back. So most weeks with this draft, I'll be playing a 3-5-2 formation. My 2 forwards are Ollie Watkins and then Thiago from Brentford, who's only 6 million. On the bench, I've got 4.5 million forward Mark Guy, who hasn't yet moved from Chelsea to Sunderland, but it sounds like it's pretty much a done deal. There's also reports going around on the morning that I'm recording this on Wednesday that there's a clause in that contract that Sunderland will be fined if they don't play him enough. I still don't think that guarantees his minutes. We've seen those kind of clauses before. It doesn't mean that a lone player will definitely play. But at the moment, for 4.5 million, he's the best we've got. And he takes up a Sunderland spot. I'm not going to want 3 Sunderland players. Yes, he might drop in price, but if he gets minutes, he's a good option. Watkins, I felt like I had to upgrade my forward line. And by the way, I don't want any negative comments about this forward line like I had on the last one with Strand Larsen and Thiago, which, by the way, I still think is viable. Like, if you want Salah, Palmer, Fernandes and Wirtz, you have to sacrifice somewhere. Why not Ollie Watkins down to like a Strand Larsen who's nailed on and probably going to have penalties as well? But when I looked at it, I felt like I had to downgrade one of Fernandes or Wirtz to get Watkins in, and that's what I've done. It's still a solid midfield. It's still a good defence. I don't really see too many issues here. I am scarred from what happened last year with Nkunku, Barco and Kwanzaa. I did tell myself my Game Week 1 squad this year will have no risks for minutes. You could argue Thiago is a risk because Visser is still a Brentford player, but that just feels like a transfer that's going to happen. And Thiago, they did spend quite a bit of money on him. Essentially, he was the Tony replacement. Let's not act like this is just a nobody they found. I think if Visser goes, which I think will happen, then Thiago will get good minutes in that number 9 role, and I think he'll probably have penalties. And for 6 million, I think that's fine. Lots of people are worried about Brentford. I had those comments on Twitter last night. I get that. All I care about is he going to play? Is he going to have penalties? And if the answer is yes to those two things at 6 million, I think he's a really solid option. And I like Fulkrug at West Ham, but I don't know if I'm as confident about him. And I think Paquetá will have penalties at West Ham anyway. So I think Thiago is a good option. Look, if he becomes not an option, I only need 0.5 to go to Welbeck or Strand-Larsen, and that's simply Porro to Romero or Lacroix to Richard. So I've got options, but I really like how that is set up. The one thing I don't have here is a 7.5 million forward, and there's lots of options at that price point. Interestingly, the rumours of what's his name, Nicholas Jackson leaving Chelsea are still going around. If that happens, they've only got Delap and João Pedro. I might be a bit more interested in João Pedro if Nicholas Jackson leaves, because it's one less competition for his spot. And he is like 52% owned. João Pedro's not been in a single draft of mine so far, but if Nicholas Jackson goes, I will be quite tempted. Chris Wood's fine at Forest, don't mind him. Solanke, I'm waiting to see if he plays the final pre-season friendly for Spurs and if he plays in the Super Cup against PSG as well. I'm very interested in him, but it's getting to the point now where I might just have to let it go as a game week 1 option because he hasn't played enough pre-season minutes. So I don't want to force a 7.5 player in, but I'm definitely aware of how many options there are. And if Visser goes to Newcastle and he's first choice, then he all of a sudden becomes an amazing option. So I think if I wanted a 7.5, there's two things. Either I'm downgrading Bruno Fernandes or I'm downgrading Watkins to the 7.5 and maybe spending a bit more money on Thiago. But I'm really happy with that. I think 5 million on a goalkeeper, yes, I'm more than comfortable with doing that. I'm not necessarily set on having to bench boost early. Ultimately, I'll probably have a decent enough bench later on. And I can always wildcard into one. I could always, let's say game week 10 or 11 before I wildcard, I could downgrade Bruno and upgrade Mark Guiu to someone else. There's options there. I kind of want to get rid of the bench boost early, but I'm not massively set on having to do that. So I think overall, this is a pretty solid squad. Will this be the final team? Probably not, right? I'm just like you. I'm tinkering with my draft all the time. But I think it's nicely balanced. I think all the players in that 11 are nailed on to start, apart from maybe Thiago, but I'm confident in him. Lacroix nailed. Esteve nailed. Mark Guiu, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with having a dead spot on my bench. I think why not do it at the 4.5 million forward? So I think it looks good, but let's look at a variation. So one player I'd really like to fit in is Morgan Rogers. I think a double up with him and Watkins looks really nice for the first 7 game weeks, given how good Aston Villa's fixtures are. So for this draft, rather than upgrading Jai to Rogers, which would only cost 0.5 million, I've upgraded Anderson to Rogers. So I've had to find 1.5 million from somewhere, and basically that's my defence. So the front 7 in this draft is Salah, Palmer, Fernandes, Rogers, and Jai, Watkins and Thiago, which I think looks really strong. Defensively, it's still Sanchez in goal. I've gone from Van Dijk to Tarkowski. So Everton's good fixtures to start. He's great for defensive contributions. Nico Williams is still there, but instead of Pedro Porro, I've got Van de Ven. And then on the bench, rather than have Esteve, because I have reduced the quality of that back 3, I've got Richards from Palace and then Anderson from Fulham. Anderson, great for defensive contributions, and he rotates really nicely with Spurs. And obviously, I've got Van de Ven there. Tarkowski and Nico Williams can be played most weeks in the first 6, and then Richards is there if I need him. So Forest at home in game week 2, Sunderland at home in game week 4. I'm not completely sure about Richards, by the way. I listened to the Planet FPL podcast. They had a Crystal Palace correspondent on there. There was some talk about maybe them going for another centre-back. If that happens, I'm pretty sure Lacroix and Gay are absolutely nailed on. Maybe Richards less so. So although Richards is slightly better than Gay for defensive contributions, maybe it's worth just playing it safe. You do not want to be messing around with 4.5 million defenders all the time. But I think if I'm going to take out Porro and Van Dijk from this defence, I kind of want 2 4.5s, I think, instead of Esteve, if I can. Like, if I wanted to do Van de Ven to Romero, I'm not against doing Richards or Anderson to Esteve. That's an option. But again, I think that looks really, really solid. Basically, during pre-season, I find you go big at the back, and then all you do after that is just constantly take money out of your defence. And this feels more like a old school kind of draft. You don't have 8 playing attackers, but that's fine. And the defence is pretty solid. Also, I think in that attack, I've got 3 definite penalty takers. Salah, Palmer, no, actually 4. well, no, let's say 3. I think Salah, Palmer and Fernandes definitely taking penalties. I'm 99% sure that Njai will be on penalties. Rodgers definitely won't be. Thiago, I think, will be. And Watkins has a chance as well. So potentially 6 of my 7 attackers are all penalty takers, which I think is quite nice. So that's an alternative. Let's talk about bench boost. So this is a potential game week 1 bench boost squad. I think unless we had confirmation of a playing £4 million goalkeeper, I would have to switch Dubravka and Sanchez to 2 4.5s. So I've gone for Verbruggen at Brighton against Fulham at home and Kelleher against Forest away. Not bad fixtures in the opening game week, and they rotate quite nicely after that. You could go Sanchez in a 4.5, but that's more money than I would usually want to spend on my goalkeepers. I've gone from Rodgers back to Anderson. That 1.5 million allows me to do Mark Guiu to Füllkrug at West Ham. Now, I don't know if I'd be confident in Füllkrug long term, but I'm pretty sure he's going to start game week 1 against Sunderland away. He's played during pre-season quite a few minutes. Yes, they've signed Callum Wilson, but the idea that he's just going to come straight in and play ahead, I don't think it's going to happen. So basically, Füllkrug will get played for game week 1, and then after that, you just see what happens. If he loses his place, he can just go on the bench. A bit like Mark Guiu would. He's just cost a bit more money. But eventually, after the first kind of 3, 4, 5 game weeks, if I've been able to build up transfers, downgrading him to a 4.5 and then using that money elsewhere is definitely an option. But obviously, ideally, you have a full playing squad on your bench boost. The thought has crossed my mind to just go for Mark Guiu and just hope that he gets off the bench at a minimum for 1 point. But I don't know if I want to tank my bench boost that much. So Füllkrug is in at 6 million, then it's still Thiago and Watkins. And the only other thing I've done really is change some of the 4.5. So Wan-Bissaka is in because he's got Sunderland away. I think Juve, lower ownership, left wing back for West Ham is also an option as well. But I think if I'm bench boosting game week 1, I guess I want to go ultra safe. So that's why Wan-Bissaka is in. And then still Anderson, which is not great against Brighton away, but he's a good long-term pick. So that's one way to play the bench boost. The other option is to downgrade one of those more premium attackers. So for this one, I've still got Salah, Palmer, Njai and Anderson in my midfield, but instead of Bruno Fernandes, I've downgraded him to Morgan Rodgers, which has saved me 2 million, which I can invest elsewhere. So up front, instead of Füllkrug, I've got Chris Wood, Brentford at home in game week 1, good fixtures for the first 6. And then in defence, I've moved things around a little bit. So Porro is back in, but I've also still got Van de Ven. So a double up on Spurs defence, primarily for that bench boost in the first game where they got Burnley at home. And then my last defender is Rodon. So I've gone back to a 4, but instead of Esteve, I've got Rodon because it's Everton at home in game week 1. Not ideal that Njai is playing against Rodon, but your bench boost is unlikely to be perfect at any point in the first 19 game weeks. So this just takes a bit of money out of that attack and allows you to have a slightly better bench boost game week 1 squad overall. I still don't really know how set I am on playing it early. I think if a £4 million goalkeeper presents itself, then maybe I just do it. But I still, in the back of my mind, have this feeling that with the wildcard, with the 5 African Cup of Nations transfers, there's just going to be something I can figure out later on, which gives me a slightly better bench boost. But also, getting rid of it now and just not having that headache is also quite a nice option. I can just use it in game week 1 or 2 and then just not worry about it until we have our second one. But the second one will probably be easier to use because it'll revolve around double game weeks. By the way, before I forget, I've spoken about like Chris Wood as a forward and Füllkrug at 6 million. I do think the closer we get to game week 1, there's a few 5.5s that people are going to look at. So I think Beto will start the season, but Barry is definitely competition for his minutes long term. I've now heard from 2 different Fulham fans that think that Muniz is first choice. I thought Raul Jimenez was first choice at Fulham, but apparently it's Muniz. The only issue with him is there's links. There's rumours linking him with a move away from Fulham. So again, you could argue that I'll just play him against Brighton away in game week 1. He's only 5.5. If he loses his place after that or gets transferred out to a different club, whatever, right? You just leave him on the bench, sell him later. But it would be nice if he continued playing because the fixtures are good for Fulham game week 4 onwards. So Muniz is an option. And also, if you're absolutely locked in on an early bench boost and then wildcard early, then Peru at Leeds is an option as well. Like until they sign another number 9, which they haven't done yet at the time of recording, he's nailed on to start in that position and he's on penalties as well. And I know people are going to say Strauch, their centre-back, could take penalties, but he's not nailed on, I don't think. And also in pre-season, they had a penalty when both were on the pitch and Peru took it. So you've got a 5.5 million Leeds forward with penalties with Everton at home game week 1. you could just risk it. But again, like Meniz, his minutes long term are not guaranteed. It depends how you want to set up. Like, I keep coming back to the fact that I'm spending 4.5 on a forward who's not going to maybe get minutes. Why not just spend an extra million, just get someone for game week 1? Worst case scenario, they just become my dead bench spot until I can sort it out with transfers. I don't know. I'm in a few minds, but that first draft I showed you is where I'm at right now. I love that I've got Salah, Palmer, Fernandes and Watkins, and the rest of the squad still looks pretty solid. And I just like the idea of saving the bench boost and just doing something interesting with it later. But we'll see. That will be my final draft video now. My next kind of video around my team will be my team selection video, which will start up next week. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Do check out Fantasy EFL as well. Link in the description below. Or you can scan that QR code on screen. Get your team set up before the championship starts this weekend. And I'll catch you again soon.